This is the JWN Podcast. I met Susanna Elliott through our mutual love for music photography. A French teacher by day, at night she loves to photograph music as a way to fully engage with the performance and capture the magic that exists when a performer is connecting with their audience. We had such a fun time talking about photography, art, music, and life through a creative lens that I know you'll feel like she's someone you've known your whole life. Here's my conversation with Susanna Elliott. I'll start recording. You could start telling us about this. You teach French.
I do. I teach French, and this has been a really COVID year has been really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think my brain has been impacted. I can't even remember things. We had to change everything. But I go to all the different classrooms, so I wear an N95, but I'm trying to teach them to speak, and I can't hear a flipping word that anybody says. So I was at my wit's end, and I realized I was going to have to be like, I needed a microphone. So I take a gigantic speaker, I have a Bluetooth mic, and I walk around. So now I've been, it cracks me up. I never would have thought that I would have felt too self-conscious to be on stage or to talk into a microphone. Now I walk around with that thing. The whole entire lower school can hear me. It's hilarious. But yeah.
I thought, it's funny when this all started and we, you see the man on the street type of reporting where they're outside, they have the mask on and they're doing the reporting from the street. And it's that muffled sound.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know somebody is thinking like, I could probably take like a lavalier mic.
Right.
And rig it up inside the mask and just like throw the wire behind their ear or something like that, and make it sound somewhat decent. But I think nobody really thought it was going to last as long as it did.
I know. It's insanity. It really is. And now I've gotten to the point where the new students that I met with just a mask, I don't recognize them without their mask because I met them first with mask and I see them with a mask every day. It's been really interesting. But the microphone thing is so funny. And originally I was upset that I hadn't gotten hands-free, but the mask has a dome. So if I hadn't gotten I have to hold it. Like I have to almost push my mask in to be able to talk into the microphone for it to hear me. So
oh my goodness.
It's hilarious. Oh yeah.
And I would think it's also a problem. So I think we started recording while you were talking. You're teaching French.
Yes.
How important is it for people to see your lips moving?
Yes, it's very important.
And see your mouth the way it's moving with the words, because
it is. So I video myself now. That's another thing that's really funny. I mean, one thing that photography and actually this year with COVID has taught me is that we all need to be a lot nicer to ourselves about our appearance. So in the beginning, I would spend 15 minutes at least, like, oh, maybe I need to change my clothes or do I need to put on some makeup or whatever. And now I just walk up to that computer and record myself saying whatever it is I need to say to my students. And I do try to make it sort of interesting. Like I do try to put on some earrings or something so that visually, but they're used to it now too. And so I video myself. And so when I go in, I'm talking to them, I'm saying the words, and then we take turns. So they hear me and then they are on their Chromebooks and they're watching me already videotaped. So yeah. So now it's funny. And what I was going to say about photography is how many times, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you'll take a picture that you think is really beautiful and then the person sees, either the laugh lines or...
Oh, yes.
It's really hard because then I thought, wow, I thought this was a beautiful moment. And so when I look at the picture, well, also I'm really happy if it's technically correct, like, wow, I got you in focus. For a while, it took me a while to make sure that I had the aperture set correctly or whatever. But I've learned that pictures that I think are beautiful or moments that I think are beautiful of a person, they don't always see the same way because they're critical of themselves.
And
so
guess what? It's funny that you even bring that up because I was reading this morning. I just kind of went on down a Richard Avedon rabbit hole. And one of the things that he's kind of famous for is there's a brutality, there's an honesty in his work because he's taking the picture that he wants to see. He doesn't care what you think.
Right.
So if somebody didn't like a picture because of that, because there was a wrinkle or a laugh line or whatever, he's like, no. I don't care
Right.
that you don't like it. That's what you are.
Right.
And that's what you look like. And that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's beautiful. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to show that.
Right.
So he had even though he was heavily retouched, like he did a lot of retouching and stuff, but he wasn't trying to change the person as much as he was just trying to make the photograph look the way he saw it.
Right.
Which is, I mean, that's the way I do my retouching.
Right.
Sometimes I'm kind of pushed into going overboard by the client.
Right.
That happens when you work with a lot of real estate agents.
Sure. Yeah.
But they, you know, for the most part, my goal is always to make a representation of the person that was standing in front of me because the photography, while it's a fact of what that person looked like in that instant, it's a complete, it's not how we see people. We don't see people in two dimensions. We don't see people not moving.
Right.
You know, so that's where the art comes in.
Yeah, it's crazy. So occasionally, you know, when I was young, we didn't have, I really don't need to talk about when I was young, but we didn't have cell phones, or pictures were harder to, you know, you had to buy the film and then process, and you would see the pictures, there would be a delay. Well, so now, and so the whole selfie thing for a while took me a while to warm up to, because I'm sometimes too self-conscious, or I feel like, why am I taking a picture of myself? But occasionally now I'll post a picture of myself, and I'm always tempted to do that, to, you know, smooth out or get
the Facetune,
the clarity a little bit less. So everything. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you know, I want people, there are some people who don't really know me. So they only see pictures of me and then see me in real life with my wrinkles.
Let me ask you a question.
So I try to be really careful, like, to be honest. You know what I mean?
No. But I get it. But when someone hands you a phone and they say, hey, can you take a picture? And you look at the scene and you're like, everything's wrong with this photographically to begin with.
Right.
So no matter what I do with this picture, I'm going to hate it because whatever the situation is, it's a busy environment. The lighting's bad. Yep. You know, they got awful like fluorescent lighting and they look green with dark shadows and everything about it stinks. And you're like, and you hand me a cell phone that you may or may not even know how to use.
Right. So, of course. Right.
And then you're like, oh, now I've got to take this picture. And they know I'm a photographer and they know they've seen my work and they're expecting that out of this scenario that they've just painted. And so you're just like, okay.
Right. Well, you work sometimes in a more controlled environment. You know,
my studio work is very controlled. Yeah.
It is. And it's so beautiful and it's very clean. Yes, I know what you're talking about. Like one night at the poorhouse, someone handed me a cell phone and wanted me to turn around. And I was like, yeah, there is no light. Like I have trouble sometimes and they have lights, you know, that's the reason why some of the photos are successful there, is because they have lights. I mean, you're taking pictures in the dark. But they'll say, take a picture of us. And so I'm like trying to, you know, lighten on their phone, like trying to. But, you know, I did a couple of years ago, one of the best things that I ever did was I tried to do a 365, a photo 365 with just my cell phone.
Oh,
so
that's a good limitation.
It was. And I think I made it to July, which is pretty good. And then after that, I didn't do every day, but I now have a habit. Like I'll just be walking down the street and I'll see some kind of light so I think and of course people haven't seen work from me, like to compare, you know what I'm saying? So I don't have the studio work that I usually do but I just try to like frame or get closer or whatever. But I think shooting wherever you are on the cell phone kind of gets you used to. So in the visual, and I actually really like documentary photography, really appeals to me.
Yeah.
So and when you're doing that, you have to make use of what's around, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you got to make it work.
But I always do, when people do that, I always want to be like, okay, now can I edit it for you? Because on my cell phone shot, I mean, that's one thing I learned. I learned about which little apps I like the best. I learned my little editing shortcuts. I spent a lot of time and I really loved it. It was worthwhile because now if I want to edit something on my phone and I can find a look, I guess, pretty quickly. So yeah.
It's it definitely has leveled the playing field as far as everyone now can be a photographer. Everyone is a photographer. And it's just a matter of, how far do they want to take it? I do get, I'm so, I'm always processing in my head how I feel about certain aspects of what all of this means. Like the catapulting, everyone now has a really high-end camera in their pocket.
Right.
And what does that mean when they take a selfie and they post it? Or they're like, with Instagram stories or Snapchat or any of those types of things where it is kind of like more of a documentary thing of like what's going on at any given moment in an active social media person's world. And then they put like those filters on that change their look completely.
I know.
To the point where I suffer from it as a headshot photographer. When they see the raw images of a medium format 50 megapixel shot come up on the screen and they're like, oh my God.
Right.
Is that really what I look like? And I'm like, yes and no.
Right.
You don't walk around looking like this. This is very clinical.
Yeah.
But you're so used to like seeing your front facing cameras, like low resolution grainy photo that you've slapped a filter on that's basically turned you into a Disney character.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've done it. So you've told that lie so much to yourself that you start to think that that's how you look like. Maybe. I don't know.
I know.
I struggle with that.
Well, and I think it's really interesting because it's almost like, what do we present? I mean, I came late a little bit to Instagram. Actually, I got onto Instagram because I let my children be there without knowing what it was.
Right.
And so in the beginning, I didn't use it at all. And then when they got a little older, and of course, the minute I was there, they weren't. I mean, so I didn't make that mistake with Snapchat. I just tried to figure other ways to have conversations about acceptable use. But I think that I still want things to be true. And the filters, I actually had a huge problem with in the beginning because I wanted to be technically good as a photographer. I wanted, and what I liked about the Photo 365 with my cell phone is that I really felt like I could hone my eye. Like now I can just look around and I compose much faster in my eye, like what would be visually an interesting composition. So I thought that was a really great thing for me, but I do have trouble now. I mean, for a while, I wouldn't want to go and do anyone's portraits because I would see these super, photoshopped. Like I didn't even realize how many times people bring in a different sky, and it doesn't look like some people do it really carefully, or the light that they bring in. And now I've seen some editing videos where you take, the cute girl with the cute dress and she's out in the field and it's ho-hum light.
Right.
And you come home and blah, blah, and figure out with your editing and all of a sudden you've got the magic golden hour. So I was looking at some of those images thinking, how do these people do this? Because you can't, you could schedule a day at the beach and then the wind, like I did one day, and the wind was outrageous.
Yes.
We were getting no shots. And that's like, how are these other, and then I realized, oh my gosh, half the time this is not even real. And so I struggle with that a little bit. And I actually also, now I feel better when I realize that you can't just put any filter on any, like there is artistic judgment in the filter that you choose for the certain picture that you use. You know what I mean? And just any random picture with any random filter doesn't necessarily make art. But it has been hard.
Sorry, I just like took a drink of water and it like went down.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
So with the history of photography, if you look at a classic photographer from the early days of photography, they were doing the same kind of thing. It's just the process was longer. Their choice of film was why you have now simulations of those things.
Exactly.
So they would choose the type of film and know that it had a certain color profile or the contrast or whatever it is, the ISO, the speed of the film would completely change the look. And then, in the dark room,
Of
they'd
course.
be burning
Absolutely.
and dodging, and
Absolutely.
they'd be manipulating photos and removing things and elongating things. They'd be doing the liquefy type stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they'd be altering things. Just it would take a little bit more effort and more work. So all of these things that we have now existed before.
Correct.
People didn't know.
Yeah.
There was like this kind of mystique, like, why is this photographer so amazing? Like, how do they get these images out of their camera?
Right.
And the answer was a whole lot of things. I mean, the image they took right out of the camera was probably beautiful regardless.
Right.
But they knew how they were going to manipulate it while they were taking the picture.
Exactly.
They knew, like, hey, this bright spot of this image, I'm going to darken that later. So I'm not going to worry about it.
Right.
And I think in a studio environment, I think the same thing too. So like when somebody's got a zit on their face, I'm like, please do everything you can to imagine it not being there while we're taking this photo. Don't judge a picture by that. A lot of times I will pop open Photoshop real quick and do like the world's quickest retouch of whatever it is that they're concerned with. So I can show them, hey, like that doesn't exist. Don't worry about that.
Right.
So we're judging by things that we can't control, like your expression and what you're emoting.
Yeah.
So yeah. But the tools on the photography side of phones, I thought it was amazing at first when the phones were less quality.
Yeah.
Because it kind of masked, like by making the phones all look like they're taking these old school analog type of images. I was like, this is great. And then the cameras got really good. And I was like, well,
I know. It is insane too how good they are, but they still have limitations. And you know what they say about, well, there's two things. First of all, it's not the tool. There really is the human element. I mean, 3 years ago, when I upgraded, it took me a while. I had gotten so used to my crop sensor, and I loved my camera. Actually, I had gotten really used to it. I had a little Canon T6, I think S it was. It was while I had it, I kept thinking I need to have more, it's low light. It doesn't perform as well, but it had great things about it. And it was a great camera. And I took some pictures that I loved. And also I learned it so well so that it helps when you know your camera. And then when I upgraded, it took a while the camera that I upgraded to was quote unquote better. You know what I mean? It's full. I mean, I just remember thinking, wow, you really do have to learn your equipment. You have to learn. I had a completely different, full frame. I had a little bit of a different composition that I had to work through. I was, anyway, I think that you always have to come back to that. And I also think, what is my goal with this? What is my purpose with this? I want to get better. I want to keep getting better. And I can't, I do have to limit any Instagram time or any computer time, because if you're not careful, you get sucked into, and you have to remember that, people post when they're in good moods. And then like 2 weeks will go by and they're in their regular crap life or, outlook or whatever. Not saying they have such bad lives, but you know what I'm talking about, our regular human existence. So anyway, it's interesting.
And it's hard to keep up with the full-time, if you compare yourself to people who master the art of sharing their work through social media, you're gonna get depressed. Right. You're gonna get depressed. But you can't. You're not going to compete with them on that level unless you had the full time and resources to dedicate it to that. And that's, you've got other things in life that you're working on and doing. Yeah. You have other passions in your life. Right.
Well, and the other thing too is there's so many types of photography. So, someone who can get really good taking a couple pictures or a lot of pictures with their cell phone might not be competition to a professional photographer because they don't have the equipment to go shoot a wedding, or they don't have, someone wouldn't go to them for the headshot maybe, or I don't know. It's complicated. And I think one thing that has happened with all of this is the machine, the content beast, like even there are people who will probably be willing to pay, but because they always want new stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. They're like, well, if I'm going to pay this much money and it's going to last me for 2 days of content. And I think that for people that really for people for whom the social media helps drive their business, it's got to feel like, okay, I've got to find another picture, or I've got to find another. And that is,
it's
a lot of job.
It's refreshing when you see, the famous classic photographers, like a Richard Avedon, he didn't have a whole lot of equipment.
Right.
And he shot primarily the same focal length. He, depending on the type of camera, if he's on an 8x10, it was a 360 millimeter lens, which is the equivalent of a 50 millimeter lens on a full frame camera. So he knew what he wanted. The equipment to him had nothing. It was just, that was just something he needed to do to facilitate his vision.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like he needed to have it to work. He surrounded himself with assistants, and he would take the picture and hand everything off to them and let them finish and give them notes on the retouching. And that's about it. So he's not a technical person
with his sculptures.
Yeah.
Rodin, you make the foot.
But I had this musician on the podcast pretty recently, Presley Randall and she's gotten into photography. Her camera is her cell phone.
Yeah.
And she's doing these really interesting, cool, like sensual portraits with her cell phone. And it's fantastic. And if you talk to her about the camera side or the photography side of it, she doesn't care.
Right.
She just wants the image to look the way she wants it to look.
Right.
And so she will use the apps on her phone and her phone, and that's her. Yeah. And that's how they're getting displayed. Yeah. Like she put her work in a virtual gallery online where you're walking through a 3D space and here's a wall and you can zoom in on her photos.
It. Oh, that's awesome.
And like it all works and it makes sense. And so she doesn't need a $10,000 camera with a $5,000 lens.
That's exactly right.
And she doesn't need any of that to do what she wants because she's just being creative. So,
and she is very creative.
She's extremely creative.
She's a very, very intuitive, I think, and creative person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Presley Randall, wherever you are right now, hopefully your ears are ringing in a good, beautiful way.
She also has a beautiful voice.
Oh, gosh. It's that dang Baby Yaga EP.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
I really do because I love it because it's so different than anything that's coming out of like that scene.
Yeah.
And as far as, it's not groundbreaking new style music. It's pretty it's pretty grungy, pop punkish type of stuff. But it's kind of slaps the face of what's going on in the music scene here. Not in a bad way.
Right.
In a complimentary way. Yeah. It's just like, let me do something my way or the way I want to do it. And I love that freedom that she has. She just does. She sees something or wants to do something, does it.
Well, so it's interesting because I actually listened to your interview with her. And one of the things that struck me that I think about a lot, and actually a friend had said to me a while ago, which she said, the only difference is that other people that she was seeing were just doing the stuff. Right. So I said to a friend of mine who is an artist years ago, I said, gosh, I mean, you can do like one day it would be I don't know, sawing or woodworking or something, and then just, seemed really dexterous and a singer. And he said, I don't know that I'm any more talented. I just do things. I just try more.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. I mean, how many times have I not wanted to try something? Because even like one of my students said to me the other day, she said, I'm not very good at speaking French. And I was like, yeah, no one in fourth grade. It's like
French kids in fourth grade.
I said, guess what? You're in good company. I said, here, let's practice these two things. But you don't have to be, we have this weird thing. Maybe it's in our culture. Maybe it's human. Maybe it's all over the world where we really feel like we have to be good at something before we try it. And that holds you back from so much. And I do think artistically, sometimes like taking pictures and putting it on Instagram, you can feel like, wow, my work isn't where I want it to be. And that can make you feel vulnerable because other people are seeing it when you put your stuff out there, you know? Or like when I first started taking pictures of the poorhouse and there were other photographers who had more experience, and that I had to keep telling myself, am I still having a good time? Yes. Yeah. Am I still seeing good music? Yes. Are my pictures getting better? Yes. Are they still letting me come back? Yes. Okay, so end of story, keep doing it.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And what's beautiful about art is that if you're trying to compare yourself to like a master, if I'm trying to compare my work to my favorite photographers, I'm going to falter and feel like either A, I'm just ripping off that person.
Right.
That's
right.
the best case scenario if I'm comparing myself to them, or B, that I'm never going to be quite good enough. And that's a trap.
It is.
That is such a trap. So just putting the work, just doing the stuff and putting the work out, not worrying about perfection. Perfection is an enemy.
It is true.
Of progress.
It's true.
You need to do the best you can do with what you have and understand there's always going to be room for improvement, and you could strive for perfection, but if you're limiting yourself to perfection, you're never going to finish anything.
That's right. And then I think too, there's room for all of us. This is another thing I keep saying, you know, but I think having a creative life is really important to us as humans somewhere. I think it's very satisfying. And so you don't have to post these things. You know, my husband plays guitar and it's just for him that every single night. And I have live music at home every night. I love it. It's not, when my son was playing the drums, that was a little harder. But Jeff, he's good, but he does not feel the need. It sustains him. It really does. It does. And I mean, it's so therapeutic. Being creative is really, so maybe there are times when you need to be more private with it, I guess, but there's room for all of us as creative people. I mean, you don't all have to be Picasso. It was like with singing, I wanted to sing forever. And then I was convinced I had a bad voice. And then in choir, people made fun of me at school because I was flat. I could never figure out how to not sing flat. And then I started teaching French to these young girls. And music, of course, is one of the most effective ways to remember anything. And so I figured I didn't really have anything to lose, so I just started singing with them. And the next thing I know, I am not a naturally talented singer, but I no longer would worry if we were going to sit down as a group and people were going to sing a song. I wouldn't have that feeling of I can't open my mouth, I sing terribly. I could now just have some pleasure in, because singing is another thing that I think is something we do naturally as humans.
Yeah, we all have a voice.
So anyway.
But singing is, singing is very difficult. I sang in a band for years.
That's right. That's right.
I am not the person you want to call up to sing the national anthem.
Right.
You know?
Well, there's different kinds of
you want
singing.
Me to scream it, maybe.
I can't remember who pointed out that there are some singers who actually don't have beautiful singing voices. They have delivery, or there's something unique about the way they sound, or they just don't care and they are really good musicians. But that they're not.
Anthony Kiedis, guy can't hit a note.
So who is that?
No, the singer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, right.
But he's stylistic. So he's got a way to use his voice that works perfectly for that music. When it fails is when, unfortunately, it's a lot of their biggest songs are like their ballads when he's singing. And of course, in the studio, they can make it fine. But then live, you see them and you're like,
not so much.
Well, Taylor Swift was like that for a long time, too.
I know. So I didn't understand what auto-tune was for the longest time. And now I figured it out. I didn't realize that you can manipulate voice or sound the same way you can with photography. It's funny because the Red Hot Chili Peppers, anyway, there's some stuff that's just so great and like speaks to our culture. I was actually living in France during the time of some of that music when it was really popular. So it's weird. It's like a cultural gap. I came home and I was like, what is grunge? You know, like
so you went away and it was like Kiss and Poison and Motley Crue, and you came back and and it's like even flow.
a little bit.
Yeah, you're like, what is going on? Is that guy crooning?
No,
what is
and
happening?
I went through such a big pop, you know, like Bronski beat. And this was earlier, of course, than the grunge. But anyway, I went through so anyway, it's funny, you're musical. But yeah, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And
I had the same thing for a completely different reason, though.
What?
Like I was, once I started playing in a band, pop radio disappeared for me.
Right.
So all of the pop music that was going on in most of the mid to late 90s to early 2000s, most of the like pop songs, like R&B and all of the songs like that my wife loves, and a song would be, she'll turn up and she's like, remember this? And I was like, no. I've never heard this song in my life. She's like, you're kidding. And I'm like, I'm sorry. If it wasn't an underground punk rock band, I probably wasn't listening to it at the time.
No, I totally. It's so funny, isn't it? Well, and then I think this is why. So one night we have some friends. We used to always get together and play music with. Our children were younger, and we could tell them they didn't have a choice. They had to come with us. We would all get together. As they got older, we didn't see each other so much. But one night we were kind of reminiscing, and the kids were around. So I cannot remember what rap music they turned on, but they were all excited about it. So we're talking about like 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And then so one of the adults in the room said, well, this is what we used to listen to. And I don't know what she put on, Run DMC or what, but all the adults were like, oh man, this is awesome. Yes. And you could see the kids kind of turn off. Like it was not part of their experience. It didn't speak to them. And I've been reading this book about music and talking about how what you hear when you grow up, you're always going to have you're going to kind of be predisposed to liking. But then also that time when you're having the huge hormonal growth or spurt, or you're trying to separate from your parents, whatever music is around at that time is really impactful. And you'll always go back and, feel the emotional response when it starts to play. And it's just fascinating. And you have to kind of train yourself to understand new music. And I've been trying really hard to do that because I think for a while I was really involved in, my children's education and soccer and all that stuff. And so then you just come home and you queue up whatever you like or whatever you know. And then the next thing you know, you haven't really listened to anything new. So it's been kind of interesting.
I have definitely, once I stopped playing in a band and I opened myself back up to like what's going on besides what was in my close sphere of like bands we were playing with, that thing. And you probably get a little bit of that now too when you're shooting music. You start to learn the music scene here. You start listening to the bands, and then that becomes kind of like your new music.
Yes, absolutely.
And it branches out from there because then they might bring a band from out of town or whatever the story is. Or Spotify or Apple Music might suggest another band based on what you're listening to. So it's easy to find and discover new music right now. But yeah, once I opened the floodgates back up and started paying attention to what was going on, it was pretty interesting because I went from like nothing, and then I quickly transitioned and I was working into working at MTV. So I went from nothing to in the middle of like the center of all of that stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So I went from like not knowing anything to being completely exposed to everything that was going on. But that was around 2000 to 2005 or so.
Yeah.
And like everything that was going on in pop music, now all of a sudden I was like, now I know what's going on here.
Right.
Right. So during that time, it's just what you're exposed to. But finding new music now to me is a joy. Like every Friday, Spotify has their like release radar playlist based on the music that you listen to.
Yeah.
And it's all the new releases from.
So I finally got around.
So excited.
I know. I finally got around to getting Spotify. So this is one thing that we all love at my house is music, and there's always music playing. But because I haven't spent as much time as Jeff has going to get new music, and so it's always really good music, but it's mostly stuff that he's looking for. So I realize that I have a far greater pop sensibility, and I actually like a wider range of music than he probably does. And so I realized that, there's stuff that I was missing. So I finally got Spotify, and now I feel like I'm catching up, making up for a lost time. It is so easy. It's so much easier. Before I was just using iTunes, and then you would have to, I like that Spotify keeps proposing like
they're
based
always
on
suggesting stuff.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So it's nice. And And I think it's fun. I mean, people are talking to you when they sing, so even if there's a area, probably the only music that I don't feel I need to explore so much is new country. I don't
Pop
love
country.
it. Yeah, I
Is
don't.
that what you mean?
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
Kind of where like Darius Rucker's been dipping his toes in.
Yes, yeah. Or
That
maybe,
scene.
I mean, not to knock any of them, maybe like, the Tim McGraw kind of thing. I don't, but otherwise, I feel like I really want to understand other people's experiences on this planet.
Yeah.
I mean, and so some rap music is really hard for me to listen to, but every now and then I'm like, I got to put this on. I have to know. I mean, I want to know what other people are thinking, experiencing, and music is one way. And there's so many talented people here in town who play. They're really, really talented. And some nights I'll just go, just literally just to have it's almost like having an alignment to go hear live music. The energy is very therapeutic. And I'm always like,
for the people that works for, I'm included in that group.
Yeah.
It's a necessity, and then there are people who don't understand it or get it,
right?
And they don't understand or get how you consume it. So, like, I am going to imagine that you might be in the same boat as me. That like when you're taking photos of a band, that is part of how you're enjoying the music.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when my wife sees me doing that, if she comes to a show with me, she came to FemFest with me, and we only caught the last couple of bands during that little mini festival, and they got a new one coming out soon.
Yeah, I know. April 17th.
There you go.
Yeah.
So go to 9to5magazine.com.
Right, exactly. No, I was just thinking
tickets.
Taylor. Yeah.
It's at the Tradesman Brewery this
yes,
time?
I think so.
So that'll be a lot of fun. But anyway, she's like, "What are you doing? Like you go up there, you take pictures, then you sit down, you go through them, and you look for something, and then you're going up doing it. Are you even enjoying the music?" And I was like, "Oh yeah. If I was sitting at home working on photos, I'd have music playing.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is how I enjoy the music. I'm like, this is why." This makes it comfortable for me, by the way. And I don't know. I when I see you out at shows, I'm like, oh look, there's another version of what I do.
Right.
So I'm not alone. It's an excuse to go to a show alone.
Oh, absolutely.
And not be bogged down by your
right. Well, it's so funny because I never really realized that before, but I was always the person who wanted to be in front. I love music, and I know that a lot of people love music, so that's not necessarily anything that's special. But when you're there, I don't know, I can't describe it. You feel it. And then, I mean, I can go and be in a terrible mood, and then the next 3 days, it's like taking medicine. And so what'll happen is sometimes I need, especially if I'm taking pictures, I need to get a little bit lost in the music. And so I have to kind of feel like I have blinders on. I really don't look at people. I saw someone the other day and she said, I called you. I saw you on the deck the other night. And I said, oh, well, I mean, first of all, I'm deaf and it's loud. And I really am deaf. And so I said, but I can't hear. And she said, yeah, but I'm surprised you didn't see me. And I was like, no, because I go in a zone and I kind of like put on blinders, and I almost think for a while I let people play for a little bit. The first 3 songs can be hard because people haven't really gotten into the groove. But then I just feel the music. And so I get to a moment, and this is part of the reason why you go up and sit back down. When there's a moment happening on stage, all of a sudden you can feel it and see it, and you want to take that picture right then. And so then you kind of back away. Yeah. And then you back away and you watch. And sometimes I'm watching the people around, but that has only been since COVID and the poorhouse shows on the deck.
Yeah.
So people are actually sitting down. But ordinarily in a show, when you're up front taking pictures, you're not always, you might turn around for the the rail shot or whatever, but you're not really watching people as they're watching the music. So, but no, for me, for sure. And then sometimes we'll go and sit with friends, and I'm like, either I've got to decide I'm going to be with my friends and the music's in the background, or I'm going to hear the music and I'm not going to talk to anybody because it can be, I get so like, I got to hear the song. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. And other people don't pay attention to it that way.
And there are some concerts I will go to, leave the camera at home, and I'll go with friends.
Yep.
Because that's how I want to enjoy it that night.
Right.
And that's the kind of music I want to just sit back with my friends, have a drink, sing, dance, whatever it is, and just enjoy their company and enjoy the whole that experience that way. Like I can switch lanes.
Of course. Of course. And I think part of what this does for me too is what you're saying. I mean, there was a certain point where we weren't going to see music at all. I mean, it's still, I've got a kid in college. I'm even if you're like, okay, well, and certainly when they were younger and then there's the babysitter, I mean, it all gets really expensive. And so to go for 30 minutes, like now I can just go for a little bit of time as long as I want, and it keeps the music in my life. That's what it is. This has been a gift to me, actually.
I've been very happy that you have this relationship with the poor. I have a similar relationship with the Royal American, which they have not been doing shows.
I know.
But I'm living vicariously through you because then I get to see your photos at the poorhouse. I'm like, she's killing it out there. And I love it because all those reasons. I don't have that relationship with the poorhouse at all.
Yeah.
I don't even know anybody involved in the poorhouse, like management or anything like that, or the people working the door. I just don't know them. I've never really, because a lot of times during regular times, the poorhouse is a fantastic venue, but it's a trip for me to get there.
Yeah, already. It is a trip. Well, and I live close by. I think they would probably be delighted to have you come shoot anytime. They're really good people. Yeah. But I do see what you mean. I've wanted to support all the venues. I just have this relationship with them, and I do live close by. But there's limits to, like, I have to negotiate the family calendar because otherwise
you would go every night.
Yeah. And, one place I want to go and support, mostly because, not mostly because, but in part because it's owned by a female, Erin Tyler, the Tin Roof.
Yeah.
I've always, and that's not too far from me either.
Terrible place to shoot band photos.
Right. Because it's dark, right?
It's dark and there's no room.
Like, I see.
Unless it's a sparsely attended place. If there's a lot of people in there watching a band.
Yeah.
You get a fight to get up front. And there's only like enough room for like 4 people to stand up front. It's not a large thing, but it's fun for if you want to shoot the environment of like a gritty show. Heck yeah. That place is wonderful for that.
Well, and I just love them all. I love the Royal American. Yeah. I love the music hall. I would love to just go and be more a part, but you can't be out every single night.
Exactly.
People tell me.
Well, my wife Amy is she is somebody who's benefiting from this pandemic in the idea that she enjoys not going out every night. She's a homebody that she likes being at home. She just does, and I don't blame her.
Right.
That's just for the same reason I like being out. Like it's just her personality and my personality are different in that way. So now I've been forced to be home a lot more.
Right.
Which is great because I've gotten to live life through her lens and appreciate kind of that slowing down and that kind of controlled version of life where you don't step out your door and you're not introducing all these variables that I thrive off of.
Right.
And it's going to be hard for me to transition back into that. And I probably won't be able to do it to the full extent that I used to simply because I don't know. I know that it would be hard for my wife. So if I can include her more in that stuff, I would love to be able to, but I also understand it's not her.
Right.
That's not how she would enjoy herself.
Well, and they don't necessarily, it is definitely a tug of war. And I always want to be sure, like once I think there was something I really wanted to do, some show I really wanted to see at the poorhouse, and I knew it was going to be I want to say be a problem, but I have to, this is a priority of mine, is being with my family and keeping my family together. So I think one day I learned I just have to let go, and whatever comes, whatever I'm available, whatever, I just kind of, it does help that I'm so much closer. It's 5 minutes from my house. But it's funny that you talk about this COVID and things changing because the poorhouse shows have been so early.
Yes.
So I even said to my boss who sees my stuff, I was like, well, first of all, I had to be sure that everybody knew that I was wearing a mask because I had to sign a thing at school, and there's so much, mask shaming and all of that stuff in the beginning. But also, the early shows during the winter were starting at 6 or 7. And then the later, because of the structure. And so now I love that it's opening back up, but I'm like, oh, wait, they used to start at 11. Like, that's hard. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll be able to go see as many starting it, but whatever. I don't have to worry about that yet.
So one of the complaints I do have about going to a show at the Poorhouse, it's like the yin and yang of yes, you have to buy the whole table.
Right.
But now you have to depend on a table's worth of people wanting to go.
Right. I know.
And not flaking out at the last second and all of the things that go along with that. Yeah. It's a lot more, you have to, everything's got to be a little bit more planned. Where back in the olden days, you just kind of show up.
I know.
And if your friends showed up, they showed up. If they didn't, you know what? I'm going to have fun anyway. I'll make new friends. Doesn't matter. But when you're stuck at a table, like you have to bring people.
I know.
I bought tickets to this upcoming Susto.
Oh, good.
Thing.
Yeah. The pod. The pod show?
Yeah. I don't even, I don't know what to expect. Yeah. It's behind the Poorhouse.
Yeah.
In the mud?
Well, I mean, there's really good drainage back there, and they've got some good rocks, which I know because they had some yoga classes back there, which I really enjoyed. But there's trees and there's the deck in the back, and they usually have the farmers market on Sundays. So yeah, it won't unless we have one of our deluges, and then at that point I would think it would be canceled but it's typically not. They have pretty good drainage back there. It's funny. I'm very excited about those shows. I'm
interested to see what it's about. I enjoyed the Bend thing, but I think the problem with the Bend shows is now you're talking about like $400 or $500 to buy a ticket to get in that you need to split between 4 people, and you're like, wait a second.
I know.
This is a band I would have paid $20 to see maybe. Now I'm going to spend $120 to see them.
I know.
And I get all of the reasons why, but now I'm like,
well, it's more of a commitment for you.
Fits in the Tantrums, but I've seen them a bunch of times for very little money, and I don't know if I want to invest $500 to buy a ticket that maybe nobody else will come.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. The Poorhouse has a one of their Facebook pages. I'm not sure. It might be the Poorhouse family page where people get together and people will be like, I bought a table. I got 3 empty spots, and they kind of coordinate that way. And so,
I didn't know that. I wish I knew that this past weekend because I really wanted to go see that Talking Heads. I know we're talking about a lot of local stuff, but I think people can understand or relate.
Yeah.
But the music, if you're into music right now, I imagine this is what it's like everywhere.
Probably, yes.
I imagine everyone's got some form of this where you have to buy a certain amount of seats and have a segregated little
I'm sure.
thing.
But, think how lucky we are to have as many, because there are a lot of places where it's pretty much shut down because it's too cold. No one can go sit in. We have family in Cincinnati, and so they had a curfew for longer than we did, which was really interesting. But it's too cold. I mean, it's too cold. Now I don't know what it's like in Colorado and the ski towns. I'm sure they've got something figured out.
They're like,
to be outside.
It's never too cold.
right. But I think we're lucky, or at least at the Poorhouse, they're lucky that they have the deck. But yes, they do have this. I think the Same As It Ever Was tribute was pretty popular. I saw a lot of movement, like please get tickets. And one person was like, stand in line, like COVID show problems, because there aren't as many tickets being sold.
For some reason, I just thought like, oh, it's a tribute band. There'll be plenty of tickets. Right. And I didn't think about it until like a few days before, and I was making plans with a friend of mine. I was like, uh-oh, it's all sold out.
I know. Apparently they have a huge following.
I've seen them before, and they're amazing. Like it's the second best thing you can see besides going to see David Byrne right now.
Right, I know.
You're going to see, it's the closest you're going to come to seeing Talking Heads right now. They're amazingly talented musicians. But anyway, let's talk about real quick how you discovered just photography in general. Like what brought you to that point? What were your creative outlets maybe before that or during? Like what other things do you do creatively, and how did you kind of stumble into photography?
Well, so let's see. I've always loved art. When I was little, I have some of my happiest memories in school being in art class, but I didn't pursue it. I really didn't think, kind of like with singing, I didn't think that I was talented. I guess I thought if you are an artist, you can draw, and that was the one way. I couldn't draw a bird or a tree, so I didn't pursue it. And I also really loved to read, and I love to write in my journal and do like patterns like this. So I didn't feel the lack, I guess, of not having the artistic expression until I was really lonely one year in France. And I was in northern France and it was gray, like the London fog kind of idea. There was no sun. It was rainy and cold all the time. And out on a whim, I went into an art store and bought some watercolors. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to ever make a living selling watercolors, but it definitely opened up a whole new world for me in terms of something I could do to entertain myself and something, and I really enjoyed it. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed those things in art class. So then I came back home, went through some kind of stumbling moments in my life and wound up, this is maybe a story for another day, but discovering that I enjoyed teaching. I never thought I would be a teacher. And that is a little bit, making your plans is a little bit of a creative kind of thing because, you're imagining how to deliver content. And it can be fun. And this exchange with students is sometimes really a really great thing. You feel like you're imparting something and supporting someone else in their life as they're going to be moving forward intellectually.
As a human, you look back and the teachers in your life, especially the ones that spoke to you, the ones that stick out, are amazingly
hugely influential, right?
And it could have been at one point if you had the right art teacher for you, might have walked up to you one day and said just the right thing.
Exactly. To keep you going.
You would have almost gotten like the fairy godmother's wand on you that said, you are now an artist.
Yes.
Because of that one little comment that someone makes.
It's so true.
Yeah. Those little, but so you taking on the role as a teacher, you have that ability.
Yeah. It's exciting. I try to point things out. And this is making me think of another story, which I'll come back to, but getting back to the whole kind of, wandering journey. So I continued still to keep my journals, try a little sketchbook and that kind of stuff. And then I had always thought it would be quote unquote cool to be a photographer. I've always liked photography, but I never picked it up. Actually, that's not true. I took plenty of pictures with your point and shoot film camera. Right. But I didn't ever delve into the technical side of it to really learn the craft of photography. And my husband loves to fly fish. And so that takes you to really beautiful spots. But there's also not a ton of coffee shops. There's, like if you're going to walk out into the woods and spend hours by a stream, you can write in your journal for 15 minutes or read a book. But after a while, a friend of mine said, you need to get a camera if y'all are going to continue to do these trips together. And so I did. So that was the first part. And then after my children were born, I wanted to take pictures of them, of course. And I went through a maternity photography sort of segment of my life too.
You went through the maternity stage.
Yeah. And I mean, Jeff took pictures of me and I was so... this was the beginnings of my journey of us appreciating ourselves because I felt so unattractive as a woman expecting. I felt really not. Anyway, he took pictures of me and I almost threw them all away. But then a year later, I looked at him and I thought, wow, this is really beautiful. Yeah. And why I didn't think it made me sad that I didn't think about it. That I didn't think that at the time.
Well, I think a pregnant woman. You can't hold any beliefs they have during that time.
Right. No, that's true.
You can't hold that as fact. That is just the person at that point being highly influenced by a major shift in everything about them.
And super sensitive.
Yes.
Well, so that sparked me to try and show other women how beautiful they could be at this time. And it was all still film. But then... and I was convinced that I was never going to convert to digital. Like I was ready to convert our bathroom to a dark room. Wow. I was ready to put the dark paint on Jeff was like, but we're not doing that. But then you can't be in the dark room when you're expecting. And so, and then But I mean, this is one time. Sometimes I swear, I think, I'm in the perfect match for me. Jeff said, you need to get a digital camera. It's going to be so much easier. You're going to be taking all these pictures. You're going to be tired. And so I did. And the really great thing that did for me was that I was able to learn to shoot manual for once and for all. Because before I would be trying to write notes, like